Well, let's take you back to Federal Parliament now, where tension remains over COVID border closures. We're joined now by National Senator Bridget McKenzie. Senator, good morning. Welcome to Breakfast.
Great to be with you.
What is your experience? What are you seeing with the borders that has you so worried?
Well, thanks for raising this absolutely serious topic. We're seeing city-centric decisions being made by premiers right across the country that are having severe and long-term economic, social and health impacts on border communities, many of which are COVID-free and have been since the start of this global pandemic. We've got countless examples, whether it's on the New South Wales-Victoria border, where I live in beautiful Wodonga, or indeed on the Queensland-New South Wales border or the South Australian-Victorian border, of cancer patients unable to access chemo, of farmers being able to tend to stock, of businesses having to close because they actually don't have the clientele or can't get their workers. I mean, we've got year 11 and 12 students in these states who can't get to class, can't sit their exams, and that's taking unprecedented toll on our communities. And I guess the frustrating thing for us out in the regions is we've been raising this for over 6 weeks. It's great to see it finally on the National Cabinet agenda, but we need people to get on with it. The risk, as you highlighted in an earlier piece, is in the capital cities. The hotspots are there. We need premiers to have the guts to shut them down swiftly and securely and let the rest of the state get on with doing business without having to bear the brunt.
Well, you raise Wodonga. How do you stop someone getting from Melbourne, travelling through Albury, Wodonga and heading into New South Wales?
Well, the reality is, Lisa, right across, and I spoke to all my border mayors yesterday, from East Gippsland right through till Mildura. Their greatest concern was Melburnians leaving what is supposed to be a hard lockdown in stage 4 and arriving on the doorstep of COVID-free regional communities in my home state of Victoria. That's the reality. They're being waved through on major arterials in a booze bus style operation, which really doesn't give us confidence out in the regions that Daniel Andrews can protect us from COVID, and obviously has a flow-on effect to state premiers about his competency to actually deal with the pandemic. But getting to the issues on the ground, we've been flooded for 6 weeks with concerns from local residents, and you've seen that similarly occurring now on the South Australian Victoria border and the northern New South Wales. There's welcomed changes out of National Cabinet that premiers are going to start to have a criteria around defining what a hotspot is, but we've got days, not weeks, to solve this in many cases.
Are the permits working?
Well, the permits, if you can get one, are working. The problem is, Lisa, that for instance, in the New South Wales Victoria border, permits are really only granted to workers within a 2-kilometre radius of the Murray River. Now, in the case of a city like Albury Wodonga, which services over 250,000 people through the region, most of the workforce can't actually get to work. And so you've got people losing their jobs, not because their employer doesn't want them in work, but because of some arbitrary city-centric decision. And you've heard the ridiculous stories of bureaucrats in Sydney and in Brisbane telling farmers to fly 40 head to Sydney to quarantine before getting to the Corowa sale yards. You can't get header drivers, that we're somehow going to get unemployed baristas in capital city out to drive machinery for harvest. I mean, that's just not a real outcome.
But isn't the problem with this argument is that overwhelmingly people who are in these states that have these hard borders are pretty happy with the situation? We've just seen it in the Northern Territory with Labor basically campaigning on keeping a hard border.
Well, Lisa, we're a nation and we have been for 120 years. I think it's incredibly disappointing that over that 120 years we've developed national supply chains of food, of workforce, of education systems, etc. And that's all at risk now. We've got teachers that can't actually get to class to teach, and that's going to have a severe impact going forward. And I think we need a nationally consistent approach and not just to be focusing where the votes are, which is in the capital cities.
Right, now, speaking of votes, is Michael McCormack in trouble?
Oh, Lisa, seriously, not at all. Everyone in the National Party is absolutely focused on delivering for rural and regional Australia, and you won't get a harder worker and anyone more focused on doing that than the Deputy Prime Minister.
You know, we'll replay this clip if we get to a point where there's a leadership challenge, because we went through all of this in February 2020, and Michael McCormack at the time said, look, I've had my leadership reaffirmed 3 times in 2 years, so why is it on the front page of the major newspaper today?
Well, you'll have to ask your fellow journalists about that.
Well, no,
All
I
I'm seeing
suspect
is
that they're hearing from your colleagues.
Speculation.
Well, they wouldn't be writing it if there wasn't some chatter behind the scenes. You know how it works.
Well, just look at the record, whether it's the live cattle appeal decision, whether it's on regional education, focusing on a better deal for our students and our communities, whether it's a freight code that now will become a template for agriculture and other areas of state joint jurisdictional responsibility. It's the National Party that's driven that agenda, and that's under the leadership of Michael McCormack, who doesn't want to hog the microphone for himself. He allows his ministers and his party members to get out there and fight for our communities.
So his job's safe?
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks very much for your time, Bridget McKenzie.
Thanks, Lisa.